We're gonna go ahead and get started. Just a reminder, if you didn't sign in, make sure you do that now or before you leave, for attendance purposes. But yeah. So today we are going to be talking about planting your garden. We do have tools and seeds in the back that we'll do at the end of class. Tools for first year gardeners and seeds, and then second year gardeners will get seeds. I was gonna do landscape fabric tonight, but I think it's just gonna be easier to do tomorrow. So we're gonna do it tomorrow. But yeah. So a couple housekeeping things. Our plant distribution is tomorrow, 4th. It will be at Possum Bottom Farm. It's located in Johnson City. It's super close to here. I think you all should have gotten an email with the address, but it's 2108 David Miller Road, Johnson City. And we will be handing out fertilizer, plants, landscape fabric, and staples. And then for anybody on Zoom, we'll have your, like if you weren't here tonight, we'll have your plants and tools, there are seeds and tools there tomorrow. So make sure that you signed up for a time to come pick up. This is very helpful for us because we are able to space, you know, who's coming, and we actually fill your orders in the order that you're coming. So if you signed up for 3:30, we're filling your order first so we can have that done. We have another few upcoming distributions. In mid-April, we'll be handing out trellising materials. So that's T-post, Fortinova netting, zip ties, tomato twines, and then we'll also have potatoes. And after our next workshop in May, depending on when the last frost days is, we'll be handing out summer plants and seeds, as well as pest and disease control. So I will send out a potato order form next week. We do have like a semi-limited amount, so I might have to limit some folks if it's like really high. And then I'll send out the plant and seed order form for summer crops. Just to clarify, the spring stuff that we're giving out tomorrow and today can go in the ground right now. Like you don't need to wait till the last frost. They're cold hardy crops. And so your summer crops will come after the last frost day so that they don't die. We have our first two we have a cooking and freezer basics class happening April 10th and April 24th respectively. I will be sending out signups for those. As a reminder, you're required to take at least one cooking and one canning class throughout the season. You can find a copy of that workshop schedule in your binders. You have to be in person. They take place either at the Langston Center in Johnson City or at the Jonesboro Farm Bureau. If you grew over the winter, this is mainly for second year gardeners or folks that already have established gardens. Please send me your harvest totals, preferably by Thursday. It's okay if you don't have any, totally fine. I just have a report due on Friday, so just gotta get that in. And then we also are launching Summer Field School, which is a program that I run. It's through another grant, but basically we go out and tour farms in the area over the summer. And so all around East Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, and Western North Carolina, there's 8 farms that we go and visit. It's every second and fourth Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. So some of examples of the farms that we're visiting are, I think the first one is a mushroom farm in Marshall, North Carolina. And then we're visiting a hydroponic strawberry farm, an urban vegetable farm, lots of like really cool places. So if you're interested, email me and I can send you the link for that. I don't know if we're recruiting. Are we recruiting volunteers yet?
Probably.
Yeah, so if you're interested in volunteer opportunities in the future, we run farm tours throughout, well, I guess it's just one Saturday in June. Where we kind of the same deal, but we just go out and visit a bunch of farms in the area and just kind of see how they operate. And then we also have a fundraiser that we're doing in September. We're also looking for volunteers. So lots of stuff. All right. I'm gonna let Lexi take it over.
Okay. My wires.
Well,
We're going to talk about planting a garden this time. So a lot of continuation of the stuff we covered at the last section. But this is your chance to ask all your questions about planting. Hopefully you have created your garden plans, you have an idea of what's going into your garden. So this is your opportunity to ask a bunch of questions about that. If you want to have your garden plan reviewed, I know Rosie's been taking them. She might share them with me, so you can take a look and help get you situated for that. So we're going to cover preparation for planting and items needed. Rosie, do you mind to get the hose and the grab. How to plant seeds and plants. I know this may seem fairly obvious to a lot of you, but I've been doing this for a number of years, and I know that not everyone knows that how to plant seeds. They've never done it before. Each seed is a plant. I want to make that super clear. I've definitely seen people. I was at a community garden planting day, and I saw someone dig a 1 foot deep hole, and dump an entire bag of beans into it. Don't know if you thought maybe that they would migrate to spots, but they will grow in the spots you plant them. So we're gonna discuss planting a little bit. I'm gonna go in a little bit about fertilizer, just to give you some education about that, so you have some knowledge. If you do a soil test or you have a situation where you have a deficiency in a certain nutrient, we'll talk a little bit about that. My favorite topic is preventing weeds and mulch on the front end, so that you're not spending the whole summer feeling weeds. It's important for me. I have had a baby, a few months ago, and had time to weed, so I'm gonna be out there covering my soil. Watering and irrigation, a little bit about what your garden is going to need water wise, and then how to set up the trellises, which we are giving out trellising material. And I had a fun idea for how to make a visual representation of the trellis, so you can participate later.
Oh,
I'm
goody.
not going to tell you about it beforehand though.
I'm so excited for that.
So site preparation. So you can see this is a freshly tilled plot. This is actually my garden 3-4 years ago. Hopefully everyone has had their gardens tilled. I know Buddy put the tiller up at Susan's house. So but if anyone needs anything, just let us know as soon as possible, and we'll get you helped. What I really like is to create, and I talked a lot about this last time, is to create these kind of hilled up, raised up areas in the soil. So that means digging out a trench. So you take the good soil out of your walking area and put it onto your bed, so you're not trampling on your good dirt there. You can set up little stakes and strings and make it really nice and neat. I tend to just go at it. I think I did a pretty good job of making a straight line there.
Same cannot be said for your
The
husband.
same cannot be said for my husband. Cannot see a straight line and see a slight. But anyway, so the point of this is to basically make walking and planting areas. I went into depth last time. This also helps with drainage in your planting areas and reduces compaction. So that's the name of the game. So for planting, what you're gonna need is some fertilizer, which we're handing out tomorrow. The fertilizer is composted chicken manure. It smells like what it is. Just FYI, I would not keep it in your living room or anything. It is good stuff. It's an organic fertilizer, so you'll need some of that. You'll need your seeds or plants. You'll need your handy dandy trowel, which we're handing out tonight. I love these things. They're pretty incredible. Yeah. You would be hard pressed to break this. And you're gonna need access to some water. Switch this over right here.
Oh, sorry.
So for planting seeds, for bigger seeds like beans, squash, peas, corn, beets, a lot of these will benefit from a pre-soak before you plant them. And this doesn't have to be too long. 2 to 8 hours of soaking will really help with germination on your seeds. I would not leave them soaking unless there's specific instructions to soak longer. I would not let them soak more than 24 hours. Seeds are living entities. They need oxygen, so they will actually drown if you soak them too long. So give them a little bit of soaking. You don't have to if it's going to rain for a few days, and you can get the seeds in the ground right before it rains. You know, that will help with germination too. So this is just something to speed it up a little bit. This is especially helpful now when the soil is pretty cold still. So it's nice to just give them a little oomph, you know, so they can get going faster enough out of the ground. You want to check your seed packets for spacing and depth. We try to label all of our seeds with that information. But definitely, and I'll show you a seed packet on a future slide where all this information is located. So basically with seeds, you just want to scratch a trench. You don't want to make it too deep. We'll talk a little, yeah, seeds should be planted 2 to 4 feet length in the soil. So if it's a tiny seed, it's very close to the top of the soil. If it's a big seed, you know, if it's a pea, you're really only going to put it down maybe an inch, you know, 2 to 4 times the length, the size of the seed in the ground. So the bigger the seed, the deeper it can go. Don't put it too deep. And so what I like to do is to just take a hoe or a trowel, and I just usually just go down the line with the top part of this hoe and just make a trench in the soil. And then I will plant into that. So sprinkle in your fertilizer right before you plant. I don't like to broadcast fertilizer over the whole garden, because then you're feeding your weeds. So I usually put it directly into the planting hole or directly into the seed trench. And you'll need approximately 2 tablespoons per row foot. I'll talk a little bit more about that on the fertilizer topic slides. Next. Space seeds, I don't necessarily like to just like sprinkle willy-nilly over the whole trench. I like to actually put the seeds in at the spacing, the final spacing. You can put a few in extra for germination issues, but I like to get fairly close to what the final spacing is going to be on the seeds. Cover with soil. You need to tamp the soil down. That means just kind of press it gently, not whacking it, but just kind of make sure that the seed has good contact with the soil surface. I like to do this with the back of a garden rake. That's one of those metal rakes that have a flat top to them. I like to just go down and tamp the line. Water very thoroughly, and then water every day until the seeds germinate. And if it's warm and it's rainy, they may, you know, germinate in 2 or 3 days. It may take a little longer. Carrots take at least 3 weeks to germinate. So you need to be out there watering them every day. And if they dry out, they probably won't germinate. Carrots are a little fuzzy thing. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to be ambitious and plant carrots, just know that they don't like to germinate. So baby them really well. So water them every day till they germinate. Water them every day, you know, for the first week or 2 as they're little baby plants. You know, but as they get bigger, you want to kind of reduce your watering down gradually. So you're only watering 2 or 3 times a week. Unless it gets really hot, I'll talk more about watering. But you don't want to be watering every day, because it makes the roots know that they're going to get water. The plants know they're going to get water. The roots stay at the surface of the soil where the water is, and then if it gets really hot and dry, the plants get really chirpy and need more water. You know, they're not very resilient things. But if you are watering only 2 or 3 times a week, the roots are actually going down deep into the soil to seek out their own water. So they're more resilient. They're more able to withstand drier, hotter periods. So baby them when they're very little. Don't baby them as they get bigger. So reading a seed packet, all this information. It's going to tell you, I think these are tomatoes. May say on it, yeah. Pear-shaped yellow fruit tomatoes. So it's indoor. So it says start indoors 6 to 8 weeks, or it'll say sow outdoors, you know, some period of time, either 2 or 4 weeks before frost or 2 or 4 weeks after frost, or at, you know, last frost date or whatever. So it'll tell you that information. It'll tell you the planting depth, sow seeds 1/4 of an inch deep. 7 to 10 days to emerge, you know. And then 6 to 8 weeks before you want to transplant them out. So this will also tell you 70 days till harvest, because these are tomatoes. So that does not include that 6 to 8 weeks that it's sown indoors. So you have to, it's 70 days after it's transplanted. So it'll tell you that information. So if it says sow outdoors, then that days to harvest means from the planting of the seed. If it says sow indoors, that days to harvest is from 6 to 8 weeks after you sow the seed and transplanted it out. It'll tell you final spacing. So spacing, they say 3 to 4 feet for tomatoes. That's for tomatoes that are not trellised, because we're encouraging everyone to trellis their tomato. You know, you only need about 18 inches in between the plants. But if you're gonna let it sprawl on the ground, they don't recommend again, you will need that extra space. And then, yeah, there is to harvest. So, and it kind of shows you when your average last frost date is on the seed packet. So you can kind of see we're in the green. So they say transplant May or June for a tendency for tomatoes, which is when we're gonna be handing out tomatoes. So plants. I would water all your plants really well before you are planting them in the ground. Just give them a really good soak. If the plant doesn't come with spacing information on it, just Google the name of the plant. Or check the plant cheat sheet, which should have general spacing requirements on it. I like to pre-dig all of my holes. That way I have the spacing correct for each plant. So I will go down, trowel, dig out my holes. I usually add the fertilizer. I would do at least 2 tablespoons per plant, especially if it's going to be a large plant taking up a lot of space. You can give it more fertilizer in that hole. So set the plant in the hole, making sure the soil line is level with the base of the plant. So where the plant, this is the base in the soil block, so don't bury the plant beyond this point. You want to make sure that this is covered in soil, but not buried in it, okay? Except for tomatoes. Tomatoes, you just want to shove them in. But the way I like with this trowel is I will actually kind of stab down in the dirt, and I will push the dirt aside like this to kind of create a little hole. I will drop the plant in there, and I will pull up the trowel like that, leaving the plant in there, and just kind of press it down in there. So this is a pretty handy planting tool. I've been on farms where they send you out in the field with this and the thousand plants, and you're just down the line with it. So you can get pretty good at it.
Do you talk about hardening, or do you want to talk about hardening?
Oh, very good. Thank you. I don't think you can slide.
Okay.
So hardening the plants off. These plants are coming from a greenhouse environment, which is very warm and moist and happy, safe environment for these plants, and you're going to send them out to the world. So I would give them a few days to adjust. So set them out during the day, and the first day or two, just leave them out for a couple hours. Bring them inside, and then kind of ramp that up. You know, maybe on the second or third day, leave them out for most of the day. Bring them in at night, and then you want to get to a point where you're leaving them out, as long as it's not below freezing, leaving them outside for 24 to 48 hours. That's called hardening the plants. So they make the adjustment from this kind of hot, warm environment to the harsh reality of the world. Get in there. If you just plant them straight, they may show their dissatisfaction by dying on you. So give them 4 to 6 days to adjust to the weather. I haven't actually checked the weather report.
It's supposed to be like pretty hot, actually.
Pretty hot.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
supposed to be like 80 tomorrow. 83 on Thursday.
So it can maybe go, just give them 3 or 4 days of babying and letting them adjust to the outdoors, and then you can put them in the ground. So yeah. Probably by this weekend, it should be good. Get them in. Tomatoes, like I said, like to be buried deeply up to the second set of leaves. So really just dig that hole deep as you can get it, get that tomato plant in there. Because the deeper they are, the tomatoes will actually grow roots along any part of the stem that's touching the soil. So you can get a really pretty good deep root system going just by getting it down in the ground deeper. Again, kind of tamp the soil so you got good contact with the plant. You don't want the top of the soil block to be exposed. So you want that to be covered with soil, but again, not too deeply. So it's kind of a Goldilocks zone. Water thoroughly once they're planted. And then water daily for the first week. Again, gradually decrease your watering as the root systems get established 2 to 3 times a week. Next. Fertilizer. So we're handing out a bag of Harmony. It's a 543. It's a certified organic fertilizer. Again, it's made from chicken food. So it's organic. So that means it's basically a slow release fertilizer. So it's got some, and it tells you on this bag that a certain percentage of it is kind of a quick release fertilizer. So that means the plants get a good boost right up front. And then it's got a big component of it is a slow release organic fertilizer so that the plants are getting fed over a period of a couple months. A lot of synthetic fertilizers are pretty instantaneous. They just give a lot of juice up front. It's kind of like putting your plants on steroids. It makes it kind of look big and beefy and healthy, but not great for the insides. So I prefer a slow release fertilizer, kind of gives it a slow, steady release of nutrients, nothing big. Those numbers stand for the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium percentage content in the fertilizer. Nitrogen is primarily for leaf growth, phosphorus is for root growth, potassium is for the fruiting bodies of the plant. So if you have a plant that's primarily eaten for its leaves, doesn't need a lot of nitrogen, like lettuce or kale. If it's primarily a root vegetable, potatoes or carrots, it's going to need a lot more phosphorus to get good healthy root system going. Potassium is again used by fruit, so most things that you're eating the fruit of, you'll need a good amount of potassium for it. I would prefer if everyone could get a soil test, but not everyone is able to do that. So just using a kind of basic balanced fertilizer, and a balance does not mean all the numbers are the same, because plants do not need all the same amount of each of these nutrients. So these kind of numbers, a 543 or a 524, something along these lines, generally are fairly balanced vegetables. It'll say generally if it's for vegetables or trees or rose bushes or whatever, and usually it's formulated for those crops. Again, those numbers represent a percentage. So it's 5% nitrogen, 4% phosphorus, 3% potassium by weight. So if you do a soil test, they are often, the results are given to you in conventional numbers. So you'll have to do a little math if you want to convert it into organic. But if the soil test tells you you need a pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet or whatever, then you're going to need to apply 20 pounds of the Harmony, 5% nitrogen, in order to get 1 straight pound of nitrogen. Does that make sense? Sorry, I hate making all the math. But this is only if you need to think about adjusting your fertilizer recommendations. You want to go back? Yeah, kind of. So yeah. So your soil test is going to tell you you need 1 or 2 or whatever pounds of nitrogen, 2 pounds of phosphorus, 1 pound of potassium. And so if you have a fertilizer that's 5% nitrogen, in order to get that 1 pound of straight nitrogen, you can divide it by, the 5%, 0.05, and that'll get you 20 pounds. You need to apply 20 pounds of fertilizer that is 5% nitrogen. So if it's 10%, if the fertilizer is 10% nitrogen, then you would apply 10 pounds of fertilizer to get your 1 pound of nitrogen. Who hates doing math? Sorry, did that make sense?
Yeah, mine's 1.5.
1.5. Yeah. Well, I think that would be 30 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Fertilizer. Yeah. Okay. So sometimes your soil test comes back and says that you're really high on something, but low on another thing. So you may just want to target that one nutrient and not try to overload the soil on generally it'll come back high on like phosphorus or potassium. And generally soil tests always ask that you add nitrogen, because nitrogen off gases. So it will actually off gas into the atmosphere basically from your soil. Potassium and phosphorus are actually minerals, so they will, or not minerals, whatever. they stay in your soil. They're locked into the soil, whereas the nitrogen will off gas. So anyway, if you want a specific source, and we'll email this out so you'll have it. But alfalfa meal, blood meal, feather meal, fish meal, cottonseed meal are really high sources of nitrogen. I like just using blood meal. It's pretty easy to find at like Mize or hardware store. I think it's 13% nitrogen, so it's a pretty good boost of nitrogen organically. Fish meal is pretty good too. Fish meal is usually more of a balanced fertilizer too. That gives a pretty good boost to the soil. Organic sources of phosphorus, bone meal is a pretty easy one to get. Rock phosphate is more of a long-term game for phosphorus. It is just rock dust, and so it takes a while for it to for the nutrients to kind of leach out into the soil. So if you want a quicker boost of phosphorus, I usually just go with bone meal. I think it's about 12% phosphorus. And it also has a little bit of nitrogen in it too. Organic sources of potassium. Green sand is usually a pretty low source. Sunflower hull ash is kind of a specialty thing. You may have to order that online. I don't know that I've seen it locally. That is some, if you need only potassium, which I would find kind of odd if you were good on everything else but not on potassium, you would put sunflower hull ash. And a little bit goes a long way, even though if you're ordering it, I think it's like 40% potassium. So a little bit will go a long way.
I'm getting artwork.
Yeah. Okay, so the harmony that we're giving, this is what we're giving out. You will need 6 to 8 pounds per 100 square feet of your garden. A pound, I weighed this out one year, is 2.5 cups. So 15 to 20 cups per 100 square feet. It's approximately 2 tablespoons per square foot. Again, don't scatter the fertilizer over the whole garden or be feeding the weeds. I put it directly into the planting pool with a seed trench to get the best results. You're just feeding the plant. Okay, we're going to talk about preventing weeds with mulch, my favorite topic. So the best thing to do is to do all this up front. So you're preventing, all these weeds growing and getting overwhelming your garden and not being able to get in there in August. So basically mulch or landscape fabric, any of this stuff is blocking light from getting to the surface of your soil. So if you've just tilled recently and you haven't covered your soil back up, I would recommend that you get a tarp or cardboard or mulch or something and just cover the surface of your garden up, because tilling especially brings a lot of weed seeds up to the surface. Now they have sunlight, they're going to germinate pretty quickly. So just blocking the sunlight keeps the weeds from germinating. It also conserves water and prevents your soil from drying out. So covering it really good means you're going to be watering less throughout the summer, and the soil surface is going to stay cooler. Plants are going to be happier. It can prevent soil-borne diseases from spreading. So especially like tomatoes have a lot of soil-borne diseases. And they're not, a lot of times it's not actually coming up through the roots. It's actually when rain or water hits the soil and then splashes onto the leaves. That's when some of those tomato diseases are getting onto the plant. So by having a thick layer of mulch on the ground, the water hits the mulch, there's no splashing of dirt. So your tomato leaves are getting saved from that particular disease. Tomatoes have a lot of diseases, so it's only so much, but you can try. And it also can help deter some pests and provides habitat for predatory beetles and spiders. You're not happy. A lot of people are probably not happy to hear that we're creating habitat for spiders, but actually spiders are super predators in the garden. So the more spiders you've got in there with good habitat, with good cover, they're able to hunt down some of the nasty pests in your garden. I will say that mulch can increase slug populations. They love mulch. So maybe if it's a really wet spring and you're having a really bad slug problem, you can take the mulch out temporarily, lay down Sluggo. Are we giving out Sluggo?
We are giving out
some Sluggo, so you can keep the Sluggo pellets on the mulch to keep the slugs down. So that's kind of the downside of mulch. If you have a roll problem, and God help you, Mulch can make it worse too. But there's not much to do with a mold problem. So, yeah, gun or
Cats.
cat, dynamite. Yeah, they're kind of the worst.
Yeah.
But, anyway, also, and using mulch versus landscape fabric, the mulch will eventually decay. And could help build more topsoil and feed some of the microbial life that's in the soil, so there's benefits and trade-offs to that.
So some examples of mulch would be like, oh, is it the next slide? I don't know. We just got a question. Oh, here we go. Perfect.
I prefer straw, I think it's pretty easy to get, you can use old hay tends to have seed heads in it. And if you're buying good straw, it has the seed heads removed because it's a byproduct of like the wheat or barley industry, agriculture. So, I've seen situations where people are growing the wheat or the barley just for hay. And so they're leaving the seed heads on it and then that'll sprout. So that's kind of annoying. Mine tends to have really good straw. And that doesn't have seed heads in it, so it's not germinating on you. Just FYI, I guess mine is now Kurt's Ace Hardware or something. I don't.
Yeah, it's up in
whatever's
gray.
Yeah. Shredded leaves in the fall works really great, or if you stockpile your shredded leaves from the fall. Grass clippings are good. As long as you're not spraying your lawn with anything. Grass clippings are also a source of nitrogen when they're fresh, so putting that on can help put a little bit of nitrogen back into your garden. Shredded paper, if you work in an office with a lot of shredded paper, it looks weird, but it's fine. It's probably the same composition as shredded leaves in terms of like, kind of a shredded product. Other organic waste, so I've seen people who like live near the ocean using different types of seaweed and stuff like that. So it's just, it's whatever you can get a hold of in large quantities easily. Which for us generally is straw, but who knows, whatever your situation is.
I use grass clippings a lot.
Grass clippings are
I'm
good.
always mowing my lawn.
Yeah. So when I say mulch, a lot of people think bark and wood chips. That's actually not what we want to put on the garden. It's good for your garden pathways if you're walking on it. But if you if you do have access to that, you can leave it in a pile to rot down for a year or two. And then that would make pretty decent mulch, but when it's fresh, it is so high in carbon that it will actually suck nitrogen out of your soil in its process of decomposing. And so it will tie up nitrogen, which means your plants aren't getting access to it. So once it started to decompose after a year or two, it's fine to put on the garden and it will actually boost some of the fungi and bacterial life in your soil. So it's not a bad thing to use, but it's not super fresh. Are there any other questions? Any other questions? Mulching tips, I like to use at least 6 inches if you're gonna go with mulch, just to keep it thick. Again, you wanna block sunlight hitting the surface of the soil. I think it's easiest to start with the mulch on the bed and then plant into it. Assuming that it's not, you don't want it too deep, if your plant is short, but make sure that it has, the plant has access to the sunlight. If you are gonna direct sow seeds into the soil, don't put the mulch out because again, you want those seeds to germinate. So you'll have to add mulch once the seeds are popped up, 5-6 inches, and then you can start trying to get mulch in there. It's a little harder. But it's worth doing. And then weeds that do kind of happen to pop up, usually because the soil is looser and not compacted under the mulch, it's pretty easy to yank the weed out. So as long as it makes it easier to stay on top of the weeds that do come up through the mulch. And honestly, I understand that things can sometimes get away from you, life happens. But the worst thing that can happen is for these weeds to go to seed. Because some of these things like lamb's quarters or pigweed, each plant is gonna pop out like 100,000 seeds into your garden. And so like each one of those that goes to seeds is just a little step for next year. So really just, you know, even if it's like trying to just get out there with a weed whacker, you know, before things start throwing seed, you know, before they start dropping their seed and cutting them down. But whatever you can do to just kind of prevent the final seed from happening.
Question two, we got our down to, and then I put that around all over it and some language should be that down because the way we had it like crazy. So we're getting compost again.
Okay.
So in Cleveland, I moved all of that stuff into the please.
Yeah.
Put the compost and then do the cover it.
If you're not gonna plant immediately into it, I would keep it covered, even with the compost will buy you some time, but things start popping up. Any part that you're not planting, like if you're saving a space for, summer crops, then I would just keep it tarp or whatever, something black plastic. Okay. Yeah, something on it. I just have a roll of black plastic that I kind of just put out there.
How close to the stems of the plant do you let them go?
With straw, yeah, I don't mind too much. You kind of wanna, you know, when you're planting, I kind of give it a little bit of space, but it'll kind of just sort of glomp in there after a while, and yeah, it doesn't hurt to do it.
Not like amending the soil for like, you know, heavy clumps of clay, or is that, will that be a part of this, or like?
I think we'll talk more about that, like in the no-till part. If you do have like giant clumps of clay, like you've tilled and there's still like huge clumps.
Yeah, so we tilled, we like planted it last year, and of course, everything's all pumped up again.
Yeah,
And we plan on, you know, hand doing it. Or
you have a broad fork. Yeah. Okay, they're just getting in there really good. And, yeah, that'll
And
just
then-
kind of help slice it.
As far as amendments, you have to go through that direction.
Like, what are you thinking?
That top layer.
What are you thinking of?
That's that organic material.
Okay,
And then-
compost.
then-
You can leave it on the surface, because all the little bugs and creatures will kind of dig it in for you. Yeah, I usually just top dress on compost.
Do you use lime?
If you need lime, you can top dress with lime, but it's gonna take a lot longer for it to incorporate into the soil. So I prefer to till lime in if you have if your pH is really off. Tilling is probably the fastest way to get that stuff in there. And then you may, if it's really, you know, have you done a soil test?
We're getting ready to, we just got there.
Okay, so, yeah, you can top dress. Especially like in an orchard situation where you can't till, you'll have to top dress, but in a garden, it's best to till it in. If it's a really bad problem, you may have to split it into 2 or 3 applications. You do one in the spring, you do one in the fall. I would test again the following year and then try to keep adjusting, because it can take a couple of years to adjust the pH to where you need it. If your pH is too low, you need lime. If it's too high, you need sulfur. If it's low, that's acidic. If it's high, it's alkaline, sulfur to bring it back down. So you want a pH really between like 6 and 6.8 is ideal for garden plants. That's really where the plants have access to the most nutrients from your soil.
So you said if it's too high, you need
Sulfur. I have seen in the 10 years that I've been doing this, 2 gardens that needed sulfur. In East Tennessee, most things are it's mostly acidic. So you need lime to adjust the other.
and if you need sulfur, it means it's
Alkaline. So that means it's above like 7.5 or 8. But again, I've seen it twice, and I would almost put that down to screw it until.
I tilled last summer, made some nice tidy rows. Now I need a massive amount of lime. I don't really want to till again. Do you think I can just?
You can top dress. And how about, what is your pH?
They went to 40 pounds for
You can find the number. It's also better to apply a lime in the fall. You can kind of, and just, if you don't want to till, especially you can put the lime down, cover it in mulch, and it'll kind of get into the soil with the rain. But yeah, 40 pounds per 1,000 square feet doesn't sound like the worst. Yeah, you can mow it or weed whack it and then tarp it real good.
In reference to cover crops.
Yeah, that's for cover crop. If you do have cover crops, you wanna start. Ideally, you would have, if for spring crops, you would have killed it, it started a couple weeks ago, but,
If you're for summer crops, you know, you could tarp right now.
yeah, for some crops, you could probably,
You could weed whack it and then tarp it. And then really you don't want to pull it out because that'll remove all the goodness of the cover crops. So you'll want to like plant directly into the residue of the cover crops and then switch it and stuff.
all right, where are we? Okay, next slide. So landscape fabric, also a good option. That's what I've been doing the last few years and what I'm definitely gonna be doing this year. It's just, you want woven polypropylene fabric. We're gonna be giving out some DeWitt Sunbelt, which I think is a 3.5 ounce. They make a like 5 ounce, that's like a professional grade, also a good choice. You need something that's partially water permeable, so that water can get through, but not light. I think it's best to combine it with some form of drip irrigation, just to help really make sure that it's getting enough, the plants are getting enough water. I've noticed it doesn't absorb all of the water, some of it's running off, so you do want to make sure that the plants are getting enough water. You also need to burn holes in the fabric rather than cutting it. If you cut it, it will fray and fall apart, but the burning kind of melts the edges, so it creates a kind of a solid hole that isn't gonna fray. You just need like a little torch.
Actually, Chris, that we are getting our plants from, he uses a yardstick with like a soup can at the end that's like taped on or whatever, and then he burns through that, so it gets like perfect circles every time.
Chris is a very clever dude.
He is.
So he should be able to show you what his little gadget tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a little, if you're just using like a little torch, it takes a little bit of practice. Give yourself space to like practice. Definitely, if you hold it on there too long, it'll set on fire. So it's really just a.
Is that a metal template?
He's probably just like a piece of plywood with like one of those doorknob drill size thing, hole saw. Yeah, hole saw. And you just kind of measure out the spacing on you can make a template like that. Sometimes I just take like a yardstick or something and just kind of eyeball it, but depends on how Virgo you want to be. How much you're ignoring your Virgo tendencies on any given day. So yeah, you can make it. I have definitely made like things like that, and then I moved and lost it. So usually just eyeball it, but and then at the end of each year, it's nice to just roll. You can roll it up and label it, so you know this is my tomato roll. This is my brassica roll, so that you know what it is. Take it inside for the winter, that way it'll last. You'll get a few more years out of it if you take care of it and roll it up for the winter. Bring it inside, and with the label, then you can just, when you're doing crop rotation next year, you already have your row, with the holes drilled out or burned out, and so you can just kind of rotate the cloth to the next wherever your plants are going. Makes it a little easier. It's good, and it may take you a few years to kind of nail down your spacing and what plants are going where. So you may have to discard a roll and start over with a fresh one if you want to change up the spacing on certain things, or you decided that, these two things didn't grow well together with each other, so whatever. With staples, yeah.
Like the stamps. Like through them up and down.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're giving out
landscape staples.
staples, yeah,
Okay.
to help hold it down, yeah.
You might need to get more though. I don't know. I think we might be a little bit limited on our amount, but we'll see.
By 1,000
Yeah.
bag, yeah. We'll see.
But, yeah.
Yeah, so we're handing out the DeWitt Sunbelt. It's 4 feet wide, so that usually will cover proposed bed. I wouldn't necessarily recommend using it with inside of a raised bed. It's mainly for inner gardening, but it would be good to line the outside of your raised bed with some landscape fabric because that, especially Bermuda grass, will just come in underneath the bottom of your bed and up into it and be really hard to remove.
Is that because of the water might cool on it, or?
So for a raised bed,
Yeah,
I just think it's not necessarily needed in a raised bed because it's pretty easy to weed a raised bed.
Okay.
Usually you're bringing in like, a compost topsoil mix, so it's a little looser and easier to get the weeds out. So as long as you stay on top of the weeding and raised bed,
maybe with like straw.
I would definitely use straw in a raised bed, but I wouldn't, you don't necessarily need the landscape fabric for a raised bed. I feel like it's just a little much, but definitely mulch in a raised bed.
Also, I just want to point out, this might seem obvious, but if you laid mulch down and then you're laying your landscape fabric and you're burning holes in it, move the mulch out of the way first so you don't set all your straw on fire.
I don't. And sometimes I will put the straw on top of the landscape fabric, because the landscape fabric is black and that can be really hot. So in the spring, that's kind of nice to kind of warm up the soil and the plants. But in the summer, I've noticed, especially with tomatoes, it gets really hot and they get a little toasty. And so using straw, which is light colored, will kind of help reduce that temperature around the plants. So if you need it, that's just a suggestion. If you're noticing plants getting kind of hot.
Are there any veggies off the top of your head that you would not recommend doing landscape fabric
Anything
with?
small, carrots, anything that you're having, anything that it needs to be really close together to the point where like your holes would be like this far apart, like that's not really gonna be that easy, or small things like radishes, it would just be too many holes. I think it's really good, especially for transplants. It's kind of hard to direct sow into landscape fabric. So it's better for transplant situations.
Sometimes the seeds move around.
Yeah, sometimes they will try to germinate underneath they won't, for whatever reason, aren't coming up through the hole, and that gets kind of hard to deal with. I wouldn't do it with corn. Anything really that you're direct sowing. Anything small. It goes well with lettuce. Again, if a transplant though. You do it.
I heard some people talk about wind and stuff, they have the high wind, they probably want to go with a 6 or 12-inch staple.
Yeah.
For a thick prod.
I think we got
1 4-inch.
6 or 8 inch.
Yeah, I think we
I think we're at 6 inch.
6-inch one.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Any kind of wind tunnel effect. Carry your stuff off. Okay, trellising. So again, this is a form of vertical gardening, which is a fancy term. Let you maximize your garden space by taking stuff up off the ground and growing it vertically. It's really good for tomatoes. I like to do it for cucumbers. You can do it with small melons and squash. You don't want to do it with like something that's going to be like 15 or 20 pounds, but for like the little, 3 or 4 pound melons, it's fine. And I've noticed that most plants will, if they're up off the ground, they'll develop kind of a thicker stem and they'll actually hold, the melon or the squash up there. So that's not really the issue. The issue with melons is that a lot of the cantaloupes, especially when they're ripe, they will actually slip off the stem. That's kind of a sign that they're ripe. So if it's hanging up and it's ripe, it will fall on the ground. So that's not great. So you kind of have to watch it, or I've definitely seen people take like pantyhose and make a little sling. Up there. So
cute.
yeah, it's whatever you want to do. With that, I don't generally trellis my melons and squash, but you definitely can want to. I've definitely seen like compost, like the little squash that germinate in your compost that are just, who knows what. Definitely see them like climb up trees and like, like squash coming out of the tree. So I don't know how you harvest that, but so they'll definitely climb. Whole beans are great for trellising. Depending, like a half runner would probably be okay on the type of trellising we're giving out. But if you've got a full pole bean, you'll probably need a taller trellis than what we are handing out. So you can just go online and find pole bean trellis ideas, and I've seen people do small panels. And then you work with a little, with pole bean, how tall are they? 4 to 5 feet tall. Okay, so it just kind of gets to the top and just sort of, and then. It's all that here, yeah. Yeah, I mean, lots of stuff will work. Beans are especially protein, so. But you can also, I've seen some pretty fun little like TV stuff that we do. So I've seen squash tunnels. Have anyone seen like the pictures of the squash tunnel? If you haven't, Google it, it's pretty cool. I've seen them, especially like for loofah, people will do the squash tunnel, so they have a nice kind of, they get nice straight loofah growing off from the trellis. Those long things you can bend them to. Yeah. And maybe the arches. Yeah, hog panel. Yeah, hog or cattle panel you can bend. So that comes in what, like a 20-foot length, 16 foot length, so yeah, nice little hump. So trellises ideally should be installed before, or at least at the same time that you're planting. Doesn't always happen. Try to get it in pretty soon after it's planted, because once the plant's in there and the roots are starting to grow out, if you're hammering in stakes or whatever, you can be damaging the root system. So you want to do it pretty quick.
We will be giving out peas, which technically would be good on trellising, but they don't get super tall. So you probably get away with it since we're not handing out trellising for another week or two, but
Yeah, it should be fine.
okay.
If you want to get the peas in the ground, I think this variety needs trellising. Whereas because we got.
I think they
sugar
both
in.
do. But yeah,
Sugar in.
they don't get super tall. But.
Yeah. The Cascade, I think, can survive without it, but I think the sugar in definitely needs it. T-posts. So this is for the system where we're handing out. So we're handing out these metal T-posts. You want to get them in the ground. We have a T-post. We have several T-post pounders. We will find
Somewhere.
them. I think they're in our storage unit.
Yeah, they are.
And or my garage. So we will find the T-post pounders. We will set up a checkout system where folks come by the office and check out T-post if you don't have, or T-post pounder if you don't have one. We'll hand out the Hortanova netting. That's this kind of plastic netting. This stuff will last forever. You know, if you take it in the winter, it's UV resistant. It's a professional grade netting. It's used primarily in the flower industry, but I think it does great for cucumbers and pole beans and that kind of stuff. So you would attach it to the T-post with zip ties. We can do, I think I've done a
We
video.
have a video.
We have a
on
video
YouTube that
on
I'll
it,
send
yeah.
out.
So, and the cucumbers, pole beans will just climb, but cucumbers, you can kind of train them up and they'll find the netting like that. It's pretty sturdy. You want probably about a 5-foot spacing on the T-post trellises. For good strength. You could probably get away with 8 feet I've done it before, but it kind of sags a little in the middle. So I think it's just better on a 5-foot spacing.
And for T-posts, that'll just be first year gardeners that will get T-posts.
Okay, so this year,
Yeah.
because they basically doubled in price
Yeah.
over the last 2 years. So we can no longer afford to hand out as much as we used to. So T-posts for the first year gardeners only. Go back 1 second. I think there was, yeah. So tomatoes, you're going to do something a little different from this Hortanova netting. You want about a 5-foot spacing on the tomatoes too, Rosie.
I don't know.
Switch the thing. Sorry,
What was the netting called?
it's called Hortanova netting. We handed it out.
Hortanova?
We
Yeah,
handed
we're
out,
handing
yeah.
it out.
You'll get it.
Thank
Just hold your arms out. This? Yes, like you're a tomato plant.
Oh, great.
What size?
Like wearing it right.
What size? So Rosie is our tomato plant.
you.
With our T-posts here. So I am encouraging folks to do something called the Florida weave. So we're also handing out twine, tomato twine to do this. I know the Florida weave kind of sounds like a haircut or something, but it's a method for trellising tomatoes, and it's basically where you're building the trellis up around the plant as it grows. And so you're sandwiching it. So you might, when the plant gets about a foot tall, you know, you're going to tie your twine onto one stake, and you're going to come around the front of the plant, anchor it to the other line, and then come around the back, anchor it, So you wait another week or two, the plant's grown another 6 to 12 inches, you're gonna do it a little higher, same, you're just gonna sandwich the plant in the trellis as it's growing. Okay, and sometimes you might mix it for a month or whatever, and you get back out there and your tomato plant has flopped over. You don't have to demonstrate, but you just kind of just get, you know, you may need someone's help, kind of hold the plant up, wrap more trellis around it. You're basically sandwiching it in to the plant. We have a video about this too, so where we'll actually do a demo on the video.
For cherry tomatoes, would you recommend that method or using cage?
No, tomato cages are sort of useless for tomatoes.
Oh, okay.
They're really just not strong enough or tall enough to really support a tomato. They might be okay for a determinate tomato, like some bright. I think we're only handing out indeterminates, so they'll basically grow into a frost. So they'll get too big with those tomato cages. Tomato cages are great for peppers. If you've got a really heavy pepper plant that's falling over, you can use the tomato cage. But no, cherry tomatoes get pretty heavy too with all the, because they produce a lot of tomatoes on them. So this method can be used for all tomatoes. Yes.
Did you say only one kind or 2 to 5 kind?
No, it's the 1.5 foot spacing per plant, so you can fit 2 or 3.
Just a
Yeah.
T-post every 5 feet.
Yeah.
With the horticulture netting.
Anything in there? Yeah. Okay, so watering and irrigation, you really need a plan now for how to get water to your garden if it's not already set up to do so. Plants need 1 inch of water every week. So, and then for every day that it is above 90 degrees, you need an additional inch of water on your garden. So just keep that in mind. If it is above 90 for a significant period of time, you're probably going to be watering every day just to keep those plants from drying out. So, more math, but this is just to demonstrate why you have a watering plan, more so than actually you having to think about your water. So an inch of water is basically 2/3 of a gallon of water per square foot. So if you have a 500 square foot garden, that's 330 gallons of water each and every week that you get to your garden. So please do not think you have a 5-gallon bucket and you're watering your garden. You're going to be, it's a full-time job. So Rosie, you'll switch. So that's a lot of water to put on your garden, but it does come out of the sky most weeks. So just keeping a simple rain gauge like this is good. My husband seems really good at running them over with the lawnmower, even when they're not in a space that should be accessible by a lawnmower. So anyway, so you can track. This is one way to track precipitation totals. These are nice just because it's tracking what's happening in your garden. So you can go to the Weather Underground is a good website. If you'll go to the next slide, you can search and you can see. You can put in the month and the year, and it'll pop up. How much it has rained. But this is kind of the average over the whole area. So this week, this whole week it got about 0.8 of an inch rain, so you're probably going to need a little bit of water to the garden to make it happy. So that just is kind of your backup information about what has rained, in the area if you need to look it up. Next one. What was that called? It's called the Weather Underground. So if you're watering by hand, you recommend just getting a little hose thing, like attachment like that. You basically you're gonna need to time how quickly it takes your water pressure to fill up a gallon or a 5-gallon bucket. So that's gonna tell you how long you're gonna have to stand out there and actually water in your garden. You can't go out there for a couple minutes and spray things and call it a day. That's gonna be nothing, basically. So, and putting it on a gentle setting like shower. And again, you're watering the roots of the plant, not the leaves. Please don't be out there just like spraying the leaves. It's going to encourage fungal growth on your plant. So this is kind of an emergency method. If this is all you've got, I would recommend investing in one of the other things that I'm about to be talking about, because again, once you figure out what your flow is, That's how long you need to be out there applying water to your garden. So again, watering early in the morning is the best way to water. Because that means that if you are getting water on the leaves, that it has time to dry out during the day, and that you're not entering into the evening with wet plants. That's what encourages fungal growth. Obviously it's gonna rain, you know, you're not in control of that, so there is gonna be some wet leaves in the evening, but you can do your part to prevent that as much as possible. I like these, you know, if you don't wanna invest in a full drip irrigation system, which is, I understand. This drip irrigation is probably looking about $150 to $200 per garden, in materials. Again, that's an investment you make once up front, and then, you know, you'll have that over several years. But these are probably $40, $50. I haven't actually looked recently. Everything's gone up in price, so this may be an outdated number. I like to combine this with a rain gauge just to get a good sense of like what's actually dropping on the garden. You can run it 1 to 2 hours, 2 to 3 times a week, and get pretty good coverage on your garden. Again, I like to water early in the morning, you know, before 10 a.m. so that's time to dry out. You can combine that with an auto timer on your spigot so that you leave the water on the spigot. The timer on the spigot controls when it's open and available to your plant, so it just does that for you. It's great. Rainwater is fine for plants if you have some sort of storage system. You probably aren't gonna be able to pair stored rainwater with an irrigation system. So rainwater from a bucket is not gonna power one of these things that requires water pressure. And it's probably not gonna power a drip irrigation unless you can somehow raise the barrel, 20 or 30 feet above the garden so you get enough pressure coming down out of it. Or you can combine it with a pump. Those are expensive options. So it's great if you're just hand watering or filling like a watering can to do it, but it's not necessarily a super great option by itself for watering a garden. So just keep that in mind. But it's free, so that's the trade-off. You're not running your water bill up with your municipal water. If you have a well, then you're probably in the best situation. Water your garden. That answer. Yeah. So trade-offs. Next one. So drip irrigation is most efficient way of watering your garden because it's really, this thing has a little hole in it, every 12 inches or whatever the spacing is, and it's dropping water directly onto the roots of your plants, right where they need it. It's dropping very slow quantities, so the soil is able to absorb it, and so it's saving you. You're not wasting water. Again, it's gonna set you back a little bit. You may be able to find a discount kit or something online. I like the Berry T-E-R-R-Y, Berry Hill Irrigation. I like their garden kits. And a lot of them come with a whole bunch of extra drip tape. So the drip tape part is actually the part that's gonna wear out the fastest, the stuff that's directly with your plant. Often you're having to replace it every 1 to 2 years. The main line and these other the regulators, the main line, the pressure regulator, all that stuff, that's probably gonna last at least 5 years. So, and that's the expensive part. The actual drip tape is not that expensive. The only thing really would probably be shipping. Again, it works really great with an auto timer, which probably will set you back maybe $50 to $70, depending on how fancy it is. Some of them are analog, so you just kind of set a dial and it sort of automatically does it, and others are digital and those cost a little more. You're gonna set it for a digital timer. Watering tips, again, watering deeply 2 to 3 times a week is better than watering briefly every day. Above 90 degrees, you need to water every day that's above 90. Using thick mulch will help conserve water, and you can run the irrigation under the mulch and under the landscape fabric. Some people prefer to run irrigation over the landscape fabric, which I guess makes it easier to access and kind of see if there's any bulbs developing. I prefer to put it under because I feel like it runs off a little bit when it's on top of it, but people can argue about that. Again, watering early is the best. Water the roots on the leaves. Any questions about water?
If you watered in the morning.
Yeah.
And your plants are still moving by the time you get to food. Just wait till the next morning.
Yeah, they'll be okay. But, yeah, if it's above 90, you're probably watering every day, so I would stick to watering in the morning. Okay. Yeah, with that. I mean, if you do that a couple days in a row and they really, really look bad, you keep watering in the evenings too. Hopefully, we're not gonna hit that situation, but probably safe. Any other questions? That's it. Same thing, no. Oh, I can talk a little bit more about the different hoses.
Yeah,
So-
talk about the post.
Again, we're still suffering from supply chain issues, so we normally only supply the scuffle hose, which is this funny triangle shaped thing. I know most people are familiar with the like chopping hoe, which is the one that kind of has the 90-degree angle on it. It's really not great for weeding and it's bad on your back. The nice thing about these scuffle hose is that it's sharp on all three edges here. So you really are, as it says, doing a kind of shuffling motion with it. You are upright. You're holding the hoe and you're running it on the surface of the soil and you are just running it back and forth and shearing those weeds off at the base of the plant. So it's best when the weeds are small. These types of hose come in different sizes. So this, we've chosen the 4-inch just because it makes it it navigates most plant spacings pretty easily, and so you can get in there without feeling and get the weeds out. So again, you're upright, which is the nice thing about it. You're not like bending over and whacking. You stay up and scuffle. Your scuffle hoe. So we weren't able to get very many of these, right?
I don't know how many we have, but we
Yeah.
have enough for first years and.
Yeah. I mean, we have definitely enough hose for everyone for first years. But we have this other variety. So this sometimes is also referred to as a shuffle hose. It's probably most commonly referred to as a stirrup hoe. Some people call it a hula hoe. This one seems to have a lot of different names depending on who's manufacturing it. But again, it's articulated here, and it's the same thing. You're standing upright with the hoe, and you're going back and forth in the ground, getting the weeds off. I like both of these hoes. I think they're both great. I own both of them. So they both have the same effect for your weeds. So just again, grab whatever available for you.